This program contains candid discussion of gender identity and may include adult topics and language. Listener discretion is advised. This episode of Trans Chat with Christiana is being brought to you by True Voice Lessons, LLC. Offering the finest in online and in-person voice and music instruction, True Voice Lessons has what you're looking for. Transgender voice training, singing, piano, guitar, and much, much more. Let our highly qualified staff of instructors help you achieve your goals. TrueVoiceLessons.com. Unlock your true voice today.
Trans Chat with Christiana. Real people, real lives, real talk. Trans Chat with Christiana.
Hi, and welcome to Trans Chat. Real people, real lives, real talk. I'm your host, Christiana Brecky. On today's episode, I'm excited to have a fun and candid conversation with my friend, Valerie Riley. She studies cryptozoology. Totally looking forward to that interview. Privilege. It's a word we hear a lot these days. White privilege, male privilege, straight cisgender privilege. There's no question that belonging to certain societal factions comes with certain advantages. But I still hear plenty of privilege deniers. Well, being white didn't give me any privileges. I had to work for everything I got in life. Cue the eye roll. Privilege doesn't mean that you get anything. You certainly don't get more. This isn't Verizon. You're not getting more minutes. No, in this context, privilege means that you get less. Less harassment by law enforcement. Less discrimination in the workplace, schools, housing, and healthcare. Fewer gazes of contempt. Less hatred just for being different. Perhaps no one is more aware of privilege than trans women. Most folks are born and die with our same sets of these sort of big social privileges. Most trans women know what it feels like to have once had male privilege and then lost it. Trust me when I say, male privilege is real. Then you might hear, well, what privilege do I get just for being cisgender? Again, not Verizon, you don't get diddly squat. Just the freedom to use the correct public restroom without the threat of harassment or violence. Cisgender privilege only affects transgender people negatively, the same way white privilege only affects people of color, and male privilege only affects women. Being able to pee in a restroom that matches your gender may not seem like a privilege to most, but I consider being able to use the correct restroom without fear of harassment or violence to be quite a privilege. To me, and many like me, cisgender privilege is 100% real. I think that's what makes it easy for me to understand Black Lives Matter. No, I'm not black, and I'll never know what it feels like to be black. But I know how it feels to be treated differently just because of who I am. And I know what it's like for people to feel an immediate hatred or disgust towards me without even knowing me. I'm a very privileged woman. That's not to say that my life is overly abundant, because it certainly is not. But I've never worried that I would be pulled over in my car and harassed by police because of my skin color, or that I might be killed in a routine traffic stop, or that I could be randomly murdered in my sleep like Breonna Taylor. Sure, I'm scared of public restrooms, but that's nothing compared to being afraid to go for a jog because some dim-witted redneck fuckface might chase me down in a pickup truck and shoot me dead. Privilege. I'm lucky enough to have a little, and I'm grateful for it. But I can't imagine pretending it isn't real just because I refuse to acknowledge the ones who are being affected by it, being disadvantaged by it. Real people, real lives, real talk.
Trans Chat with Christiana.
Today's guest is Valerie Riley. Valerie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for coming and sharing your story with us. Well, let's get right to it. Tell us about your trans journey.
Sure. So I knew from a very young age I was a little bit different than everyone else. Well, I just didn't know that aspect, and I didn't really understand how it correlated to myself. I know that when I was younger, it was something that was kind of always present and always there, but they don't teach that kind of topic in school.
No.
So it took a little while to get to that point. And I know just like as I grew up, and I think it was right around the time of like the dawn of the internet. Because I'm old enough to remember that, and just like signing on to AOL and all those great, 56K modem noises that it made. That's when it kind of like became a little bit more prevalent, a little bit more out there, because that information was there. People were actively talking about it. And when I first read it, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder if that applies to me. And I spent a lot of time, debating if it did or didn't apply to me. And, finally after so many, like X amount of years, finally said, well, I don't think any regular cisgendered person would be debating this in their head for so long and if it applied to them or not. And so once that realization was kind of put together, it kind of made me realize, like, this is probably more applicable to me than I really think it is. And that's kind of like what got the entire ball rolling, and that's where everything really kind of clicked into place for myself.
About how old were you at that time?
I think, because I was a little bit of a late bloomer myself in that, I think it always was kind of there, but I think it really started to kick into gear around the age of like 20, I'd say around the age of 24. And I mean, I'm 36 now, so it's been a little while, and it was always one of those things that I was kind of hoping would go away. And it just never did. Like, and I think that's very common. A lot.
Been there.
Where it was just there. Like, well, maybe this is just a phase that I'm going through, and and then when you look back, you're like, wow, I'm like 28 now. I don't know if this is gonna go away. I don't know, and we kind of grasp at any kind of straw because it's not something like, this is not fun. Like, I don't know any person would be like, hey, that sounds like a real good adventure. I want me a piece of that. So, so
good point.
Yeah, it's just like, because one, it's extremely costly, and there's a lot of things that and like, I'm going to be honest, like, especially with the culture that's going on right now and the ideas and the mindsets and everything. Whether you realize it or not, like, a lot of male or female, depending on your race or color, doesn't matter, but you are born with a certain amount of privilege, no matter who you are and everything, especially myself, which in the before time, that's what I kind of call it, is like, I was always thinking of myself as a cis white male, and giving up that kind of like privilege to go into something a little bit different is a little bit more, it's difficult in that sense. It's not, again, and it was that privilege that was always there. I just wasn't aware of it. And, but going through this whole like journey and this and still going through it, is ever present. And, it just it's a nice swift kick in the butt, just to be like, hey, this is what you could do before, but you can't do anymore. So.
Yeah, I didn't think male privilege was real either. And I can remember someone saying or like warning me that I would lose it when I transitioned to female. And I was like,
yeah,
male privilege? What male privilege? But now that it's gone, I know that it's very real.
Yeah.
But it makes me more aware of other privileges I took for granted, like white privilege, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
There was a point when I didn't think white privilege was real either. But now I'm fully aware of just how real these privileges are.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, it's really easy to kind of look at your life and say, there isn't any privilege that I have because we grow so accustomed to it. We grow so used to it, and it's never really put on a plate for us to really put it underneath the microscope. And I feel as though that during this entire trans journey, that does get put under the microscope and it gets magnified. So we become extremely aware of our surroundings, and I mean, it's almost to a fault because we become hyper aware of everything. Yeah. And we become hyper aware of our surroundings, what we can and can't do, what we should and shouldn't be careful of, how we speak and how we interact with everyone else.
So when did you transition? How long did it take you to go from realization to action?
Right. I think it really started when I first went in for my HRT, going to see a doctor for HRT. Uh-huh. And that was, let me think here, because it's been a little while. So I want to say it was around 32 when I first started that. I started pretty late, but better late than never. And so I was like, because I was thinking to myself, the longer I wait, the less effective it's going to be. So I might as well kind of nip it in the bud while I have a chance to, and while I'm able to still feel some of the effects of it. So
I was a really late bloomer. I didn't start transitioning until I was 45.
Okay.
Like many of my generation and prior, I just lived with it, knowing I was a woman inside, but not having the vocabulary or any role models.
Yeah.
I just thought something was wrong with me. I didn't know that transgender was even a thing.
Yeah.
And I was too afraid to tell anyone, not even a doctor or a therapist. I hoped it would go away, just like you did, but it doesn't.
It really is one of those things where you just are scared to say it because, of the environment that we grew up in. And I mean, now it's a little bit different, and I'm so thankful that things are going in a better direction now, where they are making it a little bit more aware, because I've got friends who are teachers and they have stated that kind of information, that sometimes they'll use gender neutral topics or, gender neutral pronouns for children, especially if the parents say it or if they're a little bit more verbal, which that makes me so happy. And, it was just something I wish was started a little bit sooner, but, again, better late than never. So
yeah, better late than never. I know older trans people who know they're trans, but they won't transition. They won't come out. They're too afraid of the consequences of losing everything they've built in all their relationships. It just doesn't seem worth the risk.
And that's honestly, that is the most terrifying thing to me, because let's think about this for a second. And I mean, if you really want to know regret and everything that follows it, go to an old person's home. Be like a place for old folks, and spend a day with them and really talk to them. They're not going to tell you stories of what they did. They're going to tell you stories of what they didn't do. I'm being so incredibly honest here, is that when you look them in the eyes at that person and they've got 90-year-old regret. And that is just the most terrifying thing that any of us could really witness. Because whether we want to realize it or not, being 20 is young, is so incredibly young. Even 30, even 40, even 50 is so young because you still have so much more time that you can gain and that you can experience and be happy.
Amen to that. It's great that we're reaching a point in society where there's more information and trans people don't, or at least shouldn't, have to live in the dark about their gender dysphoria anymore. So what did your friends and family think when you came out?
My friends were terrific about it. Every single one of them. I don't think I personally lost one person. Everyone, it was funny because I think one of my friends even said to me, they're like, well, I didn't expect this news today, but I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not surprised by it. And I thought that was just like the most apt description of it. It was because they were like, yeah, I kind of noticed something was there. And I was like, well, great. You could have let me know a little bit sooner. It was just like, I wish you would have told me. But when it comes to my family, on the other hand, they have been anything but supportive, and that's just one of the fun things that we get to deal with, right? And just working through that. And it's not easy. It's not fun. It's not, it is something that we just really have to work with and just really learn.
It's a process.
Yeah, and learn to deal with.
Yeah, some people will come around and some won't.
Yeah.
That's just one of the realities of being trans. Some people will never accept us. But for the others, patience is the key.
Yeah.
Some will eventually come around. I mean, my dad even calls me Christy now. And that certainly didn't happen overnight. But it was quite a breakthrough.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, it's just a reality.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I was married and I was living in a townhouse, which is actually pretty good for the area that I'm in, which is like the Northern Virginia area. Uh-huh. And, being in that kind of status kind of puts you at a different level. And, when I eventually came out, my wife didn't take it well at all. And, we did have to go through a divorce. It wasn't the easiest process to go through because she was really kind of bitter, which, I mean, listen, I get it. It's, I don't hold a grudge myself. She may, and that's fine. If that's, but that's her life and that's her choices that she has to make. But at the end of the day, it's not easy and it's not fun. But putting your best foot forward, trying to understand everything that's going on and trying to work through it, it really is, it's going to be more powerful at the end of the day. And I'm going to be a happier person by the end of everything. And then, I can live my best life ever.
Awesome. That's great advice. So what about the workplace? Are you transitioning amongst coworkers?
Right now, as it stands, I currently am not working as my gender, as my my gender identity. I'm currently doing the boy mode, as they call it.
Yeah. Living the dual life.
Yeah, living that sweet dual life, I guess. But it's funny because I actually started to transition in a previous job, and I was kind of working and just going through the motions and saying, I think because when I first started HRT, it was always like this mindset of, if I just do this, then the rest of it's going to go away and I won't have to transition. Yeah. That's where my mindset was, because I really just didn't want to go through all this. So I was like, well, if I just take HRT, maybe the rest of it will go away and I won't have to deal with it. And that's that. And, just keep moving forward from that point. Mm-hmm. That wasn't the case, but, I did have to kind of transition among other employees and everything like that. And it's funny because I do know that some employees did notice a few things, ones that wouldn't see me every day or ones that would see me very, not often, I guess. But, they would they wouldn't say anything. But they would kind of like ask other employees behind closed doors. They're like, something wrong with them, or what's up with them, what's going on. So it was just kind of one of those things that I had to deal with. Fortunately, I don't have to work in that environment anymore. It was actually a pretty toxic environment, so I did get a new job. But it's funny because I do think that like I was out to one of the previous employees, and I think she kind of informed upper management about it, and they kind of let me go because of it. Like, I really do think that. But here's the problem, is that I can't prove or deny anything because there's no paperwork stating it. And, that would be totally looked down upon now, thankfully to the new Supreme Court ruling.
Yes.
But, it's one of those things where I've got no evidence for or against it. That's just what I thought, and that's still what I think to this day, so.
Yeah, they can pass all the laws and legislations, but if a company wants to get rid of someone, there are plenty of ways to do it without, a paper trail or whatever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's super easy.
Having legislation on our side is only half the battle. So how is HRT going for you? What was it like the first time? I mean, for me, I'm sure it was just placebo effect or something, but it was like I really felt something amazing, How has HRT been for you?
Yeah, I think it's funny because a lot of women and men say that they experience a lot of dysphoria. And building off of that, I think the first time when I took HRT, there's a lot of euphoria in that experience.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like the opposite of it. And that was just a real big indication for me, like, this is the start of my journey. This is like, I'm finally moving forward with everything. And it was kind of like, it was a lot of mental release from it. And it was like, you finally took another step and moved in the right direction.
Yeah.
So it was very, very euphoric. It was very, very impactful. And it's funny because I think a lot of trans men, trans women still have the date of when they first took their first pill saved on their, phone or whatever. They've got it written it down somewhere because I know I've got mine. So, but yeah, it was always a very interesting process to go through, and that journey itself, because I remember the first time that it actually kind of took hold and made me start to not think different, but act a little bit different, because I know that I got onto an elevator with this pretty attractive woman, and I wasn't looking at her, but I noticed, the first thing I noticed about her was her hair. I was like, wow, she's got really shiny hair. And then I was looking down at her purse. I was like, oh, that's a pretty interesting purse. I wonder who made it. And then that's when it clicked. I was like, oh, I get it now. That makes so much more sense. Okay, I get it. And I know before HRT, I would have been like, oh, she's pretty attractive. She's really hot. Don't look at her, kind of thing. But now it's like, I'm here looking at her purse, wondering who made it. So,
You're right. Sounds like you're a card-carrying member of the club now.
Yeah. It just, again, that was a really eye-opening portion for me. It was funny because it was something so innocuous, but something so impactful at the same time. So,
yeah, awesome. So what sort of advice would you give to someone who was just starting on their journey?
Don't be scared. I mean, listen, the answer is very simple, but it's also very difficult. I get that.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be easy for anyone and everyone. And if you are in a position where it does come easy to you, awesome. I'm super happy for you. But for someone like who knows that their family is going to be extremely opposed to it, or their friends are not going to be happy with it.
Yeah.
When it comes to friends, you can always get new ones. I mean, and I hate to sound really, abashed by that, but it's really true. And when it comes to family, it's something that is going to have to happen. You can't live your life predicated on their beliefs. Because I think what a lot of parents do, even mine are guilty of this, is that they treat their children as an extension of who they are. And, their parents are saying, well, they'll talk to their friends and say, oh, little Bobby went to, Harvard University. Well, let me tell you what my son or daughter did. And, it's that keeping up with the Joneses kind of mentality that our parents harbor.
Yeah.
And, honestly, and here's the best part of it all, is that doing what you feel as though is right is so much more important. And it's ultimately what your parents want, even though they may not know what it is that you want and what it is that you want to do. And they don't even know it's what they want. But ultimately, if you want to be happy with yourself and not to live to the age of being 90, 80 and having all that regret behind you, you have to move forward with it. And it's scary. I get it. Like, it's not fun. It's not easy. But I'm telling you, at the end of everything, you're going to be so much better. And a lot of people are stuck in this phase of, I don't know if this is right for me or if it's good for me.
Yeah.
There are some doctors out there that will start you off with a very low dose of estrogen or HRT in general. And, I think the right answer is just go in for a consultation. That's the first step of it all.
Yeah.
Because it's like holding out an apple. And you're thinking, do I like this apple? Well, the right answer is to fucking eat the apple. That's all it is. It's like, that's how you're going to know if you like it, if you want to move forward with it. That's the right answer.
Right.
And, I remember I would look in the mirror every day and I would look into those eyes and I would say, I hate that person. That's not who I want to be. I don't like that person at all. And the thing is that you're not born or built to say, I hate me. Like, that's ridiculous. Nobody's built like that. And it's because of listening to what other people say, and it's listening to what other people do and trying to figure all that stuff out. The right answer is to make your own decisions, to make your own choices, and move forward with those.
Yeah, good advice. Considering everything trans people have to go through, like the things you just touched on, it's really no wonder that so many of us deal with depression, myself included. Is there anything you do, like when you're feeling particularly down or depressed?
One of the biggest things is to realize that every person should have 3 core values. And the ones that are important to me is being patient with it. Patience is a huge thing. Yeah. And it's so easy to say, but it's hard as hell to execute. It really is, because, this stuff feels like forever. If you're in a bad state of mind or if you're in a bad place, I get it. I've been there and I know what that feels like. But it's not going to be forever. This is just a very small portion of your life. You've got, so many more years ahead of you, and you've already went so far. Gratitude is another big thing. If you can have a roof over your head, or if you can, if your stomach is full at the end of the day, just be grateful for that. Right. And there's a lot of things in my life that give me happiness. I know one of the big things is my dog, I love that dog like crazy, and she's like so happy to see me every time I come home, and she she's a big source of my happiness, and just finding those small things that give you those gratitude. And the biggest one is empathy. Empathy is so huge. And when people online or in person say nasty, negative things,
Yeah.
that's difficult to deal with. I get it. But instead of hating them because of what they're saying or how they're saying it or what they're saying, feel really bad for that person, because I know that listening to those people spew those hateful comments, they're a sad person. They're probably sadder than you are. And, for them to have so much concentration on everything and just kind of put everything into a head and just say, well, you're a piece of trash or you're garbage or whatever, that's not helping them. Like, how's that helping them at all? It's not. They're in a bad spot, especially with all this online hate and all that online. Who cares what Johnny Pants 82 has to say, or what, it doesn't matter. Right. And you should feel bad for that person because they took the time out of their day to write a comment about you, and you're upset about it. You need to realize that you're so incredibly sympathetic to that person and what they're going through, because it's 10 times worse of what you're going through.
Yeah, they must really be feeling some kind of really real pain or hate or anger to say those things, and that stuff eats you up.
Yeah,
inside.
I know that on Reddit there was whole groups dedicated to just spewing out hatred and garbage, and it's just every single one of those people I feel so bad for, because they spend so much of their time listening to maybe podcasts like this one, or maybe researching about topics, or going onto other subreddits to read what other trans people say. That doesn't help anyone, and they're spending so much time looking into it instead of just letting people live their life. Honestly, if I was a person that hated with a passion, I don't know, Toyota trucks or Toyota cars, I would not spend all this time researching and looking into why, their product is a piece of garbage and then go write about it. That is so much time out of my day. I gotta be honest, I don't have that much time in my day to do that kind of stuff. I wish I did. That would be really nice. But you gotta really feel bad for those people.
Yeah, I agree. They must be living with an inner turmoil that's even worse than gender dysphoria.
Yeah.
I would go on to add that having a sense of community. When I was in my early transition stages, I didn't know any other trans people. But I joined a Facebook group and got to know a few and, meet others like myself going through the same things. And that was really helpful for me.
Yeah, it was funny because I remember in high school, I was like, well, maybe I'll get my chance to explain myself to someone if they come out gay or lesbian or join the LGBTQ plus, diversity. Yeah. And little did I find out that not a single one of my friends did it because I was that person. So, that's a really big, indicator of where I am and where I stand.
And what final words of encouragement would you give to the trans kid or grown-up struggling with their gender identity and hesitant to come out?
I think one of the biggest things is I really feel pretty strongly about the fact that a lot of people are fed really bad, negative information. That, because we're always being sold products in this consumerist society, is, that you're not good enough, your skin's not clear enough, you don't eat the right diet, you're not smart enough. But I'm really here to tell you that you are strong enough, you are good enough, you are, an amazing person, and it really, you're honestly, everyone is strong as fuck. That's the really biggest thing. Yeah. And go do shit. Just get up and do it. That's the starting point. And I really hope that, any part of what I said helps at least one person out there.
So, Cryptozoology.
Yes.
It's a term and a discipline that I was totally oblivious of until you first mentioned it to me.
Yeah.
So tell us about it and, what you do in the field.
Yeah, so I've always been interested in cryptozoology, and it's essentially a build off of words of zoology, which is the study of animals, but this is more specifically animals that are hidden or, that are not necessarily not recognized by science yet because we don't have enough information of it. I know when these topics like Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster get brought up, a lot of people instantly jump to, oh, you must be a believer in that stuff. And my personal perception of it is that I just want the real thing. I want the scientific evidence of it. I want, the science, the data, and the theorems to back up everything. But that doesn't mean that I can't research it and look into it and get really invested into it. I know that one of the big things that is very local, pretty local to me, is Mothman. And I was able to do another podcast about Mothman and go through that experience and just, try to figure out what it was in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, people were seeing and what they were experiencing during that time. And I think there's even a movie of it, of Mothman Prophecies. But it's funny because you go down to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, a really podunk town that doesn't really have much of anything. But yet in the middle of the town, they got this bright, gleaming, clear as day, like stainless steel statue of Mothman. And it's like, it's such a weird thing to come across, especially in like a smaller town like that. But it's really taking the scientific kind of idea and that mindset to put everything underneath that spotlight and try to figure out what exactly is going on here. Like, is it really some sort of mythical creature or interdimensional creature that we are not aware of yet? Or is it a misidentified, known animal, which that's what I personally believe, is that it was an owl that they really saw that, people were seeing at night just because, when you see an animal at night, you can't really gauge the size and, how big they are and everything else like that. Or maybe the animal looks a little bit different. Maybe it's got mange and it's hairless and you think it's Bigfoot when it's really just a bear. So
yeah. So did you disprove it then?
So me personally, I will not take credit for disproving it. I will take credit for supporting the idea because there's authors and researchers out there, like one that I have a lot of respect for. His name is Joe Nickell. And he is such an incredible person because I feel like, if you really want to figure out if something, if you really want to go get to the root cause of something, you get Joe Nickell on it because he will find out, he'll solve it for you. If you just listen to some of the talks he's given, but I do support his claim in that it's a barred owl and not a barn owl. And there's a big difference between the two. And it really boils down to the eye shine, something that was very classic and very prevalent within the Mothman case, because a lot of people would say they would see two bright, almost reflector-like eyes, which is very typical of the barred owl to give off, and it would be a very bright red color, reflector color that they would shine off of the eyes, and that was just due to the biological, the way that the eyes are made up and everything else of that nature. So,
have you looked into any of the other cryptids and not been able to, sort of disprove it?
I know that one thing that really, I personally believe that if there was one creature that is going to be real, it's probably going to be Bigfoot, but probably in the Himalayas or something of that nature. I have a hard time kind of putting all that stuff together and, seeing all the evidence that's been brought forward. I really it's difficult to kind of explain everything away. And I know, like, what a lot of believers will do, they'll kind of always move the goalpost on you because you'll be talking to them. They're like, what about this sighting? And then you say, well, maybe it was a hoaxer that was pretty well known for it. Yeah. And then they'll say, well, okay, what about this one? And it's like, it just never stops. It's like this never-ending cycle. So, but I mean, is there a Bigfoot out there? I personally don't think so, but if I had to put stock into one, it would probably be that one.
What an interesting field. You look into what are basically legends and then try to determine their legitimacy.
Yeah.
So what about the chupacabra? Have you ever looked into the chupacabra?
Yeah, it's funny because I remember that when the chupacabra, that was actually one of the first kind of like internet cryptids and that's short for a cryptozoological creature, which is cryptid. But that was kind of like one of the ones that grew up with the beginning of the internet, because that was one that was very popular to talk about around that time. And it was very almost alien-esque in the beginning, but now it's kind of morphed into like a hairless dog, and it's like just this like it's this interesting progression that it kind of took on. When it comes to the chupacabra, a lot of them I really do feel like that those are dogs with just mange, that like hairless dogs, because we're not used to seeing those creatures, right? And just kind of putting those dots together. And I think my all-time favorite one is Loch Ness Monster. I just love the idea of like this dinosaur living in this loch. And I think when everyone sees it, the first image that kind of pops into your head is that black and white photo that they call the sturgeon's photo, and like with the neck just kind of being raised out of the waters and everything. But what's really disenchanting about that one is that when you look at the physiological like bone structure of plesiosaurs and those kinds of creatures, their necks couldn't move in a very like swan-like fashion. And so once you realize that, everything else kind of shatters a little bit, especially like when you look at drawings or photos, they always show it to be this very like wavy swan-like neck. And it's sad because the bones just couldn't interlock with, it wouldn't work like that. It just doesn't work.
Valerie, you're a smart and interesting lady.
Well, thank you.
I always enjoy chatting with you. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And it's always great to be here. So
come back sometime and tell us all about your next fascinating cryptid.
Will do.
Awesome.
Sounds like a plan.
What a fascinating chat with Valerie. Her positive attitude and zest for life are contagious. And I love the amount of passion she has for the things that are near and dear to her heart. As a trans person, sometimes I feel kind of like a cryptid species myself. A creature that must live in the shadows of society, hidden for fear of violence and hatred. With a public perception that's shaped by myth, legends, and rumors instead of facts. Someone to be feared, loathed, and exploited. The parallels, sadly, are undeniable. People may not like us, or even believe that we're real. But unlike Bigfoot, we're not going to stay hidden away from society just because we make some people uncomfortable. And we're not going to sit idly while those who know nothing of the transgender experience continue to stoke fear and disseminate lies about us. Thank you for listening and supporting the trans community. If you haven't already, subscribe, like us on Facebook, and join the conversation. If you're interested in supporting the podcast, visit our Patreon page and consider becoming a patron of the show. Until next time, I'm Christiana, and this is Trans Chat, brought to you by True Voice Lessons, LLC. Take care, be safe, be you, and be proud.